Hello guys, and welcome back to another video of the Python tutorial series that's happening on the channel. In today's video, we are going to be looking at some data types in Python, or what we refer to as data types in Python. Data types refers to the kinds of data items that are there depending on the value that you can take and what sort of functions that you can perform on that particular item. And data types not just restricted to Python. It's general programming concepts that's in most programming languages. So whatever you might learn here might also help you in programming in other languages like, let's say, C, Java, JavaScript, and all of that. But today we are going to focus on Python. We're going to focus on the data types in Python. Now in Python we have about four major data types that are there, and I'm going to list them out first, then we look at them and think about them, or I'm going to state them one by one and we talk about them. So the first one, the first data type is what we call a string. I mentioned that in the previous video where we printed something out to a user. I mentioned that. So the first data type that we want to look at is a string. So the question now is, how do you define a string in Python? How do you write a string in Python? To write a string in Python, you just write your sentence, your word, your phrase, whatever, in quotation marks. So this is a string. Stringing. So basically, this is a string in Python. A text in a quotation marks called a string. Basically, a string is just a string of characters, or should I say a sentence or a phrase or something. Anything that you write like that, a word, is a string, is what we refer to as a string. So the first one is strings. That's the first type of data types that we learn. Now the second type of data type that I would like us to look at is what we call integers. I'm sure you've heard of this maybe in school or something. Integers, normal integers that are there. So numbers like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all of that, they are integers. Now to write an integer in Python, you don't need to suffer too much. All you need to do is to basically write the number. So this is an integer, 12 is an integer, 400 an integer, 0 an integer, 03 also an integer, maybe 8 is also an integer. So all of these are integers in Python, right? So far we've looked at strings and we've looked at integers. Now there is also another type of data types in Python. This one is referred to as a boolean. And a boolean is basically having two possible values, either it is true or false. So the value being true or the value being false, this kind of this kind of object or this kind of data types are referred to as booleans. So either true with a capital T or false with a capital F. So note the capitals, it's very necessary because some languages write it with small letters, some write it with capital letters. For Python, we use capital letters. So true and false are boolean. They are the boolean data types that we have in Python. Then there is also another type of data type that's what we call a float. Float, which is actually short for a floating point digit. And if you can guess, it's basically an integer with a decimal place. So those kind of decimal numbers, they are referred to as floats in Python. So you could have something like 3.5, 3.1, the value of pi, 3.142, that's a float. 2.0, 6.0, that's a float. All of these are floats. So know the difference. These are integers. They don't have any floating point decimals attached to it. But these ones are floating point, numbers. That's the difference. So basically you have strings that can be written like this in quotation marks. They are basically words, sentences, letters, characters, anything that has to do with the alphabet. And then we have integers that has to do with numbers, but without the decimal part of numbers, just integers. Then we have the boolean data type, which is basically true or false. I'm sure you've heard of boolean mathematics, true or false. If you've not heard of it, don't worry about it. And there is also float, which is the floating point decimals or the decimal numbers 6.0, 1.42, 3.142, 3.15. All of these are floating point numbers. Now, before I end up this video, I'd like to show you one function for checking the type of a particular data type. Now to check the type, I'll show you this function. The function is called type. We talked about functions in the previous video when we looked at the print function. This function basically takes in whatever you give it and it returns the type of that particular thing. So for example, if I put in here type of 5, and I print this out to the user. If I print this out to the user, so basically I'm finding the type of 5 and I'm printing the whole of the result out to the user. So if I go ahead and save this file, go to my CMD, clear, and I basically try and run the file Python, and I think we named the file 01 introduction.py. Remember, currently I'm in the scripts folder, so I don't need to navigate to that place again. I just need to write the file name. If I hit the enter key, it gives me some things over here. It says less than class, then it says integer or int, or then increase the greater than over here. For now, if you don't know what a class is, don't worry about it. We'll look at it when we start talking about object-oriented programming. But just know that a class is basically the how would I say it? It's just a framework for certain things in Python. And this one is saying that this 5 that we've written over here belongs to a class called int. And int is short for integers in Python. So anywhere you see int, know that it's an integer. And if you want to check for other data types, so you can put this thing in quotation marks. Also, you should know that if you put 5 in quotation marks, even though the 5 over here that you're putting in quotation marks is an integer, the fact that it is in quotation marks makes it a string. So it has turned into a string. So if I go ahead and run this code again, I end up seeing str. And str is the name given to the string data type in Python. So if you see anything in str, know that they are referring to a string. If you want a boolean, either true or false, so I can put in here true. If I go ahead and save this, and then I go back to my terminal and run this, they write bool, which is short for boolean. And if I go ahead again and change this true to maybe 5.7, we are expecting a float or something that refers to a floating point number. I save that, store it, and they are telling me that this refers to a certain class called float. So in today's video, we looked at 4 main data types in Python. We looked at integers, we look at strings, we look at boolean, then we look at the floating point numbers. And I hope now you've got a certain idea of what data types are and what it can be used for. Don't worry if you've not really gotten the use right now, but know that when you are working with this kind of programming languages, mostly you'll be dealing with sort of data, some kind of data or information, to derive something from it and give it to the user or something like that. And they have to have some sort of classification for the kinds of data you'll be dealing with in Python also. So that's why all of these are done. So for now, just know that there are 4 types there are 4 basic data types in Python: integers, strings, booleans, and floating point numbers. And we'll be using them in upcoming videos. That's it. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to support, you know what to do. Leave a like on the video and then share it to your friends and all of that. If you have any problems, questions, or anything related to what we have covered in this video, please do leave that in the comment section. I will definitely help you out. If you have suggestions, additions, also leave that in the comment section. We'll check them out. We are all trying to learn here. So that's it. I'll see you guys in the next video.